Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. In this video, we're going to be discussing the life of none other than Nicolas Flamel. In my last video, we looked at the story of Merlin, an enigmatic figure that appears to have made his way into endless adaptations of folklore and pseudo-historical accounts. The way that his story is told in some instances makes it seem as though Merlin really walked the earth in exactly the way that he has been described to us. However, by analysing the texts, we can deduce that Merlin was created by Geoffrey of Monmouth, combining two real and prominent historical figures, Myrddin Wyltt, a North Brythonic prophet, and Ambrosius Aurelianus, a Romano-British war leader. So Merlin was real, in a way. But the thing that makes Nicolas Flamel even more of an enigma than Merlin is the fact that he completely and totally existed, and his name and identity didn't really change along the way. Like Merlin, Flamel is included in all sorts of folklore, pseudo-historical accounts, and even historical accounts. He's all over the place, and it makes him that much more intriguing. His character and identity, the man he really was clearly interesting enough for people to adapt into folklore, and that's exactly the way Flamel found his way into Harry Potter. Let's start by taking a look at the real Nicolas Flamel, the man that all of these fictional adaptations were based on. Flamel was a French scribe, born in the year 1330 in the city of Pontoise. He lived in Paris for the majority of his life, and spent much time there over the course of the 14th and 15th century. Flamel was such an influential figure in Parisian history that there is even a road named after him, called Rue Nicolas Flamel. Even more interesting than that, one of Flamel's original houses still exists in Paris to this day, at 51 Rue de Montmorency. It's been expressed that Flamel's former home is the oldest stone house in the city, and there is even an inscription on the wall which states, "We, ploughmen and women living at the porch of this house, built in 1407, are requested to say every day an Our Father and an Ave Maria, praying God that His grace forgive poor and dead sinners." On a day-to-day basis, Flamel worked as a scribe and manuscript seller, and ran two shops, offering these services in Paris. Flamel achieved a great deal of success in his career, and as a result became quite wealthy. In the year 1368, Flamel would go on to marry his wife, Myrddin, a generous benefactress who had a great deal of money from her former two marriages. Like Flamel, a road was named in her honor after her demise, Rue Myrddin. The pair were a couple of wealthy philanthropists who lived good, solid lives. Myrddin passed away before Nicolas in the year 1397, and Nicolas lived until the year 1418, which was a considerable amount of time for someone to live in that era. But posthumously is when things really start to get interesting for the enigmatic figure that is Nicolas Flamel. Sometime in the 17th century, hundreds of years after his death, legends started to appear about Flamel, claiming that he was a successful alchemist who A. discovered the Philosopher's Stone, and B. achieved immortality. The texts claim that Flamel had learned his alchemical secrets from a Jewish converso on the road to Santiago de Compostela, and that was really what sparked the identity of Flamel in fictional works. From that point onward, Flamel was no longer just a wealthy scribe who lived a reasonably long life. Suddenly he was a master alchemist who achieved immortality. It's crazy what can happen hundreds of years after your death. Flamel's legendary accomplishments as an alchemist were first mentioned in Livre des Figures Hiéroglyphiques, an alchemical text first published in 1612. The text outlined that Flamel had succeeded with two great achievements in alchemy, the first being that he created the Philosopher's Stone, which was purported to have turned base metals into gold. The second achievement was that he and his wife had succeeded in creating an elixir of life, which allowed them to achieve immortality. Flamel was truly an icon in alchemy, and had reached legendary status within the circles of alchemy by the mid-17th century. He was even mentioned in Sir Isaac Newton's journals. So that pretty much covers both the real Flamel as well as the fictionally adapted Flamel. But what about the Flamel of Harry Potter? Where does he fit into all of this? In Harry Potter lore, Flamel actually wasn't all too different than the Flamel of the 17th century texts, and it's clear that he had an influence on Rowling, as the first film is named after the very object which he is purported to have created. In an interview, Rowling discusses Flamel. Nicolas Flamel is a historical character. Flamel lived in France in the 14th century, and is supposed to have discovered how to make a Philosopher's Stone. There are mentions of sightings of him through the centuries, because he was supposed to have gained immortality. There are still streets named after Flamel and his wife, Myrddin, in Paris. The Flamel of the Harry Potter universe was born in the year 1326, I'm not sure why this is 4 years earlier than the real Flamel, but there you go. There is a stark difference in his lifespan, however, as the original Flamel died in the year 1418, and the Flamel of Harry Potter lived until sometime between 1992 and 1996. Not a bad go. He ended up being one of the oldest wizards in history, losing out only to Wizard Barry Winkle, who lived to the age of 755. The Nicolas Flamel of the Harry Potter universe, like every other witch and wizard, of course also attended a wizarding school. In the early 14th century, Flamel began attending Beauxbatons, Academy of Magic, a French wizarding school located in the Pyrenees Mountains of France. This is apparently also where he met his wife, Myrddin, who stayed by his side for their considerably long existence. Nicolas kept a relatively low profile for a lot of his life, remaining in his Parisian home and pursuing all sorts of alchemical endeavours. In the 1890s, Flamel first met Albus Dumbledore, who at the time was a brilliant teenager that showed immense magical promise. As mentioned on Dumbledore's Chocolate Frog card, Dumbledore also achieved a great deal of success in alchemy during his lifetime, and I have no doubt that this was a result of joint ventures with Flamel. Though Flamel is referenced in the Harry Potter books and films time and time again, he never actually gets any screen time in the original Harry Potter franchise. However, Flamel was featured and shown on screen for the first time in Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald. During Gellert Grindelwald's attempt at a tyrannical revolution, Flamel reaches out to Dumbledore and offers up his home as a safe house for any of their allies, should they require it. Flamel was supposedly a kindly old man with a polite disposition, and this is clearly shown in the film when he welcomes Newt, Jacob, Tina, and Yusuf into his home in Paris. During the events of Fantastic Beasts, Flamel was already over 600 years old, but he still dedicated a considerable amount of energy toward helping Dumbledore, Newt, and his other new allies with defeating Gellert Grindelwald. Flamel, in addition to being an exceptionally gifted alchemist, the most famous of all time, in fact, was also skilled in other areas of magic. His alchemical skill allowed him to exercise his potion-making ability to the greatest extent, eventually creating an elixir of life that made the drinker immortal. Flamel also had an extensive knowledge of the dark arts and a knowledge of defensive magic that matched it. He even mastered divination, being able to use a crystal ball to see events unfold, and was versed in both wondrous and non-verbal magic. Though Flamel could have lived forever had he continued to utilize the Philosopher's Stone, him and his wife eventually embraced death. Flamel knew that the stone that he had created would ultimately bring more harm than good if it fell into the wrong hands, and that's why he and Dumbledore made the decision to destroy it. Flamel is such an interesting person, both inside and outside of the Harry Potter universe, and I'm interested to see what his role brings in the future Fantastic Beasts films. We've got 3 more on the way, so I'm confident that we'll see more of Flamel. What did you guys already know about Flamel? I'm always wanting to continually learn more about these interesting historical figures that have made their way into the Harry Potter universe. If I've missed something, comment it down below. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Until next time, you're a wizard, Harry!